Hello, everybody. I'm just taking my little record note down. I've hit record now. I think everyone's coming in. There's a few more sitting in the waiting room. Sorry for the delays there, folks. Computer one wasn't talking to computer two, and we couldn't see John's beautiful presentation, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of today's presentation. So for those who don't know me, my name's Chloe Thompson. I'm a committee member on the HMAA, and I have the pleasure of introducing you to John Colwill, who's going to talk to us all about West Australia's amazing annuals. So if you would like to ask a question at any time, John, would you prefer that they just use the chat and I interrupt you if there's a question, or would you prefer them to hold to the end?
Oh, either way.
Either way?
As we go, perhaps. Yep.
Okay, sure. So if you've got a question, just pop it in the chat and I will interrupt John with that question when it's on the appropriate slide or he's taking a breath. So John, over to you.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for joining me. I want to begin by just recognising the traditional custodians of the land on which I sit, which is the Whadjuk tribe of the Noongar Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. And I'd also like to recognise a couple of taxonomists who've had a considerable effect upon the work that I do. First of all, Philip Short, who has done some amazing work with many of the Asteraceae, but in particular the brachyscomes. And secondly, to the late Paul Wilson, who was based in Perth and basically went right through Asteraceae. But apart from that, a thoroughly nice gentleman and warm, and encouraged me greatly. And I really did appreciate his help. Okay, so now let's get into an introduction, and let me begin with a couple of clauses. One, I'm an amateur, I'm not a professional botanist, a very enthusiastic one, I might add. Two, WA is huge. So please don't ask me where's the best place to go and see the wildflowers, because you'll have to fill your tanks up before you do that. Okay, now in theory, Chloe, I'm supposed to see my notes, but actually I can't, which is a bit of a problem. So we'll see what happens when I press the button.
That's a shame, John. Let us know if you need a
It is a shame. We have an astonishing range of flora here, which basically reflects the range of conditions, topography, soils, etc. And some of them have been known for a long time. These three I've put up on the screen now have all been in cultivation for a couple of hundred years at least, because they were recognized by the early botanist explorers, plant hunters, and taken back to Europe. So the Penguin White Everlasting is on the left, Mangles Everlasting in the middle, and the Swan River Daisy on the right. But they are but a very small component of what's actually available. When you go out and have a look in a good year, and it's all about the season, you see an astonishing variety of plants mixed together. I thought it might be worthwhile, though, starting by telling the story of these plants. When you go out in the bush, if you're me, you don't go out in summer. It's pretty hostile out there. And if you want to survive as a plant, if you're going to survive through summer, you've got to be very tough indeed. But the other way around it is what these annuals do, which is say, oh, yeah, I'm not going to bother trying to grow in summer. That's just too hard. I'll go to sleep. I will rest in seed form. So whilst this looks virtually devoid of colour and bare soil, air temperature 40 plus, ground temperature 70 plus. In fact, there's a whole heap of life just asleep there in the ground. And what they're waiting for is this, which is no longer as reliable as it used to be. But when the rain comes, these plants respond, and they respond very quickly. There are millions of seeds in the soil. A huge variety of shapes you can see there. And this is just some of them. They range from quite large ones, easy to see, to other ones that are almost like dust. A fairly common feature are the tails on the seeds, the pappus, and these play a very important role. Most of these seeds are windblown, so this helps with distribution, obviously. But also these seeds, and the pappus in particular on some of them, have remarkable properties. This is one you might be familiar with. This is the pink and white everlasting. And it's a very hairy seed. You can actually rub all the hairs off and you land up with a thing that looks more like a grass seed. But these hairs are hygroscopic. They absorb moisture, and also as they absorb it, they twist. And what you get when you wet one of these is one of these. And it's just a glug. It's it's interesting because not only does it wet and twist, it also has, and I don't know what what it is, but it has a sort of glue-like texture in it. And in fact, when a seed like this dries, and I've had it dry on plastic containers, you've almost got to chip it off. It's remarkable. I think there's scope for a natural glue in some of these. So it glues to the ground, and that's where it will stay and germinate. Obviously, it's holding moisture around it as well. And these generally germinate on or very close to the surface. As you can see, these were actually sown right on the surface. And this is taken over the space of about 4 days, each day marked by a complete turn there of the plants. I love time lapse. If you've got the same screen that I have with all the pictures down the right-hand side, then you might not be able to see the plant responsible for this. On the far right is the little seedling, 4 weeks from sowing, which means it had probably been germinated for about 2 weeks. And the seedling itself is only about 3 centimeters long, and the root is getting close to 20. So it's very important for these plants to get a rapid and fast start as they deep start as they can. And what's fairly typical of all of these, you've got to remember life's pretty opportunistic out there. You don't know when it's going to rain. You don't know how much you're going to get. So your priority is very first thing, get growing and send up one flower. Now that's number one. And that way you've ensured at least a small contribution to the seed bank for the following year. But if conditions remain good, then you keep producing more stems, more flowers, taller flowers, bigger flowers, until essentially it dries off. So instead of this, you can go through in a good year to this. I wouldn't like to estimate how many flowers are here. And I regret that really I should have sent the drone up a bit higher then and looked further across the landscape, because this is literally as far as the eye can see. This was 2016 in a place called Paynes Find, or close to Paynes Find, on a station. Quite remarkable, quite remarkable. And that, of course, is what we're famous for, is its carpets of colour like that. That was the good year. This is the bad year. So these are plants 3-4 centimeters high. That's it, maximum. And they will still manage to go through and still manage to produce some seed, which is quite remarkable. Many of the plants too respond very much to the sun, much like the sunflower. They will track the sun around because the object of the exercise is to attract the attention of pollinators if you can. Not always successful. But on the right-hand side, you've got the plants as they face the sun, and this is one of the Laurencellas, and on the left-hand side is the back view. If they're lucky, they get visited by insects. And I say if they're lucky, because if you think back to that scene of the Cephaleptrum I showed you a moment ago, there aren't anywhere near enough insects in the bush to pollinate all these plants. Not even enough flies. You might find it hard to believe when you go traveling out there at times, but nowhere near. The lucky ones get pollinated by insects, and this, I believe, is called a meadow argus, the butterfly that's pollinating this one. If they don't get pollinated by an insect, then they self-pollinate. And these annuals, generally speaking, are very, very good at self-pollinating. In fact, it's the major means of getting seeds. And
John.
when they do, yeah.
Oh, sorry, just a quick question there. Judy's asked the land that you saw there covered in the flowers, the big wide photo, is that naturally cleared or has it been cleared?
That's totally natural. Totally natural. No, no influence on that at all. It's on a pastoral station, so there might have been sheep wandering around occasionally, but that was it. Yeah. All right. So yes, sorry, back to this. I paused it because I wanted to show you what's happening with this one when all the flowers have been pollinated and when it's setting seed. And to see the amount of seed is amazing. My one regret in getting this time lapse is I didn't have anything at the bottom to catch all the seeds that had fallen, so they just disappear. But you can see an astonishing amount being pushed out into the wind, ready for distribution. And there they fall on the ground, and that's where they stay. And that continues the life cycle as we've seen it. It's worth remembering, though, that these things are lying on the ground through summer, and they get very hot. You need some help, Neville.
A question, John, from Helen Young. Are they wind pollinated as well as insect pollinated?
Not as far as I know. And I should, maybe I should have said this at the start. There's an awful lot I don't know. The more you observe them, the more you realise there's behaviour there that we haven't quite worked out yet. But wind is certainly the main distributor, but not, as far as I know, a pollinator. Not as far as I know, anyway. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll talk about other aspects a little bit later. Right. A few lessons we can learn when we come to cultivate these plants, and they're generally speaking easy to cultivate, except the ones you really want to grow, which are absolute mongrels. But generally speaking, sow seeds on or very close to the surface. I've come to the view that it's probably much better just sown straight onto the surface because of that characteristics of the seeds to be able to lock onto the soil. And even those without tails, there are a couple of disc-shaped seeds, for instance. When you wet them, they appear to have that same gelatinous substance that locks them to the soil. And I've wet an awful lot of seeds onto blotting paper just out of curiosity, and then let them dry out and then seen how hard they are to pull off, and they all stick, and they stick very well. So we sow the seeds on or very close to the surface. And the important part of this is that there's a general feeling, for instance, if you're growing the everlastings, what you do is you rake the soil, you scatter the seeds, and then you rake the soil again. And I would urge you not to rake the soil again, because what you'll end up with is most of the seeds being planted too deep, being sown too deep in the ground. Rather, instead of raking again, just water, and that activates the pappus and that locks the seeds in position. The other standard, if you talk about storing seeds, is people will always tell you, well, store them somewhere cool and dry, stick them in the fridge or something like that. And of course, we know that the long-term storage is in the Arctic ice, but with many of the seeds of the West Australian flora, they may well last longer if you store them in very cool conditions, but I can tell you they germinate much better if you actually store them in warm to hot conditions. Very early in the piece, one particular species I could not get to germinate well, and out of frustration I put some in a calico bag and I chucked it up on the tin roof over summer. I sowed it and up it came like grass. So it may well be that the heat I won't say it overcomes some dormancy, but it certainly does seem to be beneficial. And the other thing is, if you want to preserve the flowers, you've got to pick them early, because the moment you break the stem of a flower, it goes after its primary goal, which is to set seed, and it will use all the moisture in the stems and the leaves and everywhere else to go and finish its journey to set seed. So when you're picking them for drying, you've got to pick them very early ideally just before the buds open. Now that's a bit like taking a pill half an hour before you wake up. But if you can get it just right, it works well. And strip the leaves off to remove as much of the moisture source as you can. And that way they will last longer. I'm often asked also about fertilizing these plants. When you analyze the conditions under which they grow, and again, that big field of Cephalyptrums, no nutrients at all. In fact, very limited nutrients in the soil. If you do a nutrient analysis, there's almost nothing. However, they are opportunists, and I've seen areas where there's one cow pat in the middle of low growth, but immediately around the cow pat, whoomph, they're double, triple the size. They respond very well to the application of nutrients. Not native fertilizers. I get a bit concerned about that terminology. That's another story. But a general purpose fertilizer does the job. And when I grow them, I use a controlled release, but I use it at a quarter of the rate that's recommended because they will take all the nutrients you can give them. But when they get very large, they get floppy and fall over and not at all attractive. Okay. I am asked frequently, where's the best place to go and see these flowers? So please don't ask me today. I'll tell you why. A, it's a very big state. B, it depends what flowers you want to see. And C, it depends very much upon where it's rained and how much it's rained. So if you are seriously planning a trip to WA to see flowers like this, I would recommend before you go onto the Weather Bureau website, BOM, and you go to WA observations, and you can see rainfall overview maps. And that's a wonderful tool because it lets you see where and how much it's rained over a week, a month, 3 months, whatever. And that is the key to where they grow. Now, I've put here, and again, I'm concerned about where your pictures are. Are you seeing your images on the right-hand side of the screen?
No, we can just see the single slide that you're looking at, John.
Oh, great. Okay. All right. So you can see there, what I've done is taken Asteraceae, just one family. It's reasonably representative of the annual species. And that's how they're distributed. So you haven't got many in the north. You've got a fair swag in the southwest, but the majority of them are there in the central parts and through to the deserts. On the left of the screen, those dots are a bit misleading because they're not records of species. They are records of observations of many species. So what that means is that people have looked a lot more down in the southwest corner than they have across into the central desert area, but it's still a useful guide. Now, I think we'd better have a look at a few, but before I do, I'll show you this. You probably know this habit. I'm sure that many of the daisies, when the humidity increases, now that can be at night time or when it rains, they fold up over the true flowers in the center. These are composite flowers. I always think the change of the name to Asteraceae was a shame because it used to be Compositae, and that really told the story of what they were. But what happened a long time ago in Europe is they had plants that had the same feature, and they referred to the center of it as an eye. And because it closed up at night and then opened in the day, and you saw the eye in the day, they called it day's eye. And from that, we get the word daisy that we use now all the time. Just total aside. Some insects in the bush know that our flowers do the same thing. So keep your eyes on the central flower there. And as it opens, you will see that there was an occupant during the night. There he is. Now, these little insects, and probably quite a range of them, they know that the flower's going to close up at night, so they go in and they get warmth and protected, and yeah, it's a nice, cozy little home. The price they pay is, of course, that they get covered in pollen, but it's, again, You can see the size of the pollinator that's playing the role there. This is a lobelia. They don't close up, but they sort of fold up. And in the morning, this is like getting up and having a really good stretch out to see the sunshine. I love the way they do this. And then there are other plants, Myriocaphalus, that they protect the true flowers, again in the centre, by just folding over. But if anybody can give me the answer to this, I'd love to know, why is it the brachyscomes do quite the opposite? Instead of folding over, they go here. Little gentle flowers, important parts. You cop the full brunt of whatever's going on outside at the moment. If there's a potential PhD student watching, I reckon there's a PhD in that. Right, let's have a look at a few, and I'm sorry if I get too many. Out of the thousands that are available, I picked about 100, so bear with me. If it gets too much, you might want to watch the recording a little bit later. And what I've chosen to do is to put them into families. So we go family, genus, species. I'm certainly not showing you all of them, certainly not, but some of the showy ones and some of the more interesting ones. So we're starting with Amarantaceae, and that's Gomphrena is well known. It's been in cultivation. The central picture there was taken at Kings Park. They're very good at growing these. Canescens is perhaps one of the showiest ones of all. Then let's go down to the other members of the same family, Tylotus. There are, well, I'm not sure how many Tylotus. Somebody might tell me, but I think, no, let's just leave it at an awful lot. There are more being found all the time. Perennials and annuals. Most of the annuals tend to be low growing, almost ground coverage, very showy in the case of Axillaris, you can see in the middle there. Quite colourful in the case of Carlsoni. One that's very common, you will see it through a wide area of the southwest of WA, or southern half, I should say, is Gordichordi. And then I think one with probably the best horticultural potential is Hylipterioides, so it's like a Hylipterum. Unfortunately, most of the Tylotus, while they're very good, they don't set a lot of seed. And there are people who sell seed, but what they're really selling is spent flower heads. If you actually get down to the seed itself, which is almost like a little ball, you might start out with a whole sack of flower heads and land up with half a cupful, if you're lucky, of little balls. Interestingly, well, later on I'll be talking about the future of these things, not too rosy. Some of them have gone the other way. In the centre bottom is Tylotus polystachys, and that is becoming a weed for us, a significant weed too. If you drive up the Northwest Coastal Highway, which takes you from Perth up through to Carnarvon, on the side of the road now, you'll see nothing else. It's just taken over. And nobody knows why. This has only happened in the last 5-10 years. Nobody, again, knows why. Another PhD project, perhaps. All right, very showy, but extremely frustrating are the actinotus, our annual forms of the flannel flowers. And they really are specky. They are found generally after a fire. So the recommended treatment, if you want to get them to germinate, is smoke water. I've had limited success with that. I think this year, probably from about 300 seeds, we've got 9 plants, which by my standards is pretty darn good, but it's worth it. They're so good. Oh, I should say 9 plants of Leucocephalus and no plants of Superbus. Shame. Let's move to another family. Aureliaceae, a well-known plant again. It's probably been in cultivation for a couple of hundred years too. It's been going under the common name of rotnest daisy for some time. A few problems with that. It grows in a lot of places other than rotnest, and it's certainly not a daisy. So nowadays, the common name that we prefer is blue lace flower. And it's dead easy to grow. It's got huge horticultural potential, particularly if we can get it a bit smaller, which is what I've been trying to do. There are other trachamines, quite a lot throughout the state, many similar to the blue lace flower, and then a group with much smaller flowers but more showy fruit, generally known as sponge fruits. Every now and again I thought we'd pause because there's too many plant names, and I thought I'd show you the blue lace flower as it unfolds. I do love time lapse because it does tell you so much about the plant's behavior that you wouldn't see on a regular basis. This one was taken over about 4 days. And my great regret is I didn't prop the flower up so that it wouldn't move out of the center of the screen. Next time I will. Right. The biggest family by far of the annual species in WA is Asteraceae, the daisy family. But they're not all daisy-like, as you will see. We're starting off with actinobole. I think that's how you pronounce it. Probably need to get some ruling on that. These are small plants, little daisy flowers. If you look very closely, they're down there, generally at ground level and sometimes growing in extremely hostile conditions. Like the two on the, well, sorry, center top and top right, both grow in very hostile conditions. Angianthus is another one with, again, not obvious petals on the flower, cone-shaped, but they could also be a little bit flat and star-shaped. And again, growing in hostile conditions. Bottom right is Angianthus tomentosus, which has the common name of camel grass, very widespread. And I always assumed, but never actually checked, that it was called camel grass because the camels like to eat it. I know that kangaroos certainly do like eating many of these as green forbs. I mean, the only ones they had. We're going to stay in Asteraceae for a while. Asteridia is a group there, a genus that really contains some wonderful plants, curious and interesting. And on the top left is Asteridia asteroides, and I should say that most of these photographs are mine, but now and again I borrowed a few, so thanks, Aileen. That's one plant I haven't found, but I think it's got huge horticultural potential. And on the right-hand side, you can see how ornate and pretty some of the Asteridias can be. Let's go down to the bottom middle. Most unusual plant. I've lost count of how many times I've been asked what this is. This is Belida graminea. It has this bright, when you look down at the ground, and something I recommend to everybody, look down at the ground all the time, which is why I keep walking into tree branches. This is bright green, lollipop green almost, and grass-like, hence the graminea. And from that little clump of leaves, you get these stems rising out and arching up, and they're topped by yellow cup flowers. And you think, oh, that's interesting, but not particularly showy. But the moment it gets pollinated, the pappus, the tails on the seeds start to grow, and the tails are bright red. And so when you go over to the bottom right, that's the same plant in full, not flower, but full seed, which gives it the name of paintbrush daisy. Well earned. Brachyscomes, another big group, subject to revision constantly and always difficult to identify because really the final ruling on which species it is based upon the shape of the seed, not the flower. So you have to have seed if you want to get a good identification on it. So some well-known ones, particularly Swan River Daisy, again on the top right-hand side, extremely variable plant. It ranges from tiny, flat on the ground with white flowers to tall, thin, spindly. And that's a form that grows in the Great Southern, and I think one of the best ones. Bottom left is one of the brachyscomes that said, I can't be bothered producing any petals or bracts. It has none at all. And you look at it 2 or 3 times and find it very hard to work out what it was until you had some seeds. I've also included there a couple of the Roebuckiellas, and the reason for doing so is until recently they were with brachyscomes. But now they've been hived off into their own genus. Quite a few of these, mainly starting in the centre of the state and running north. But pretty showy, easy to grow. Coeliocarpa is very easy to grow, nice, showy little plant. One of the ones that I think's got great potential. Calicephalus, top left, mostly not very thrilling ornamentally, interesting nonetheless. I mean, I love them, but tight, compact, showy flowers, and I've just picked one to show you there. But the Cephaleptrum is the one you saw en masse there. It's usually either white or yellow or shades in between. It's right through the state almost. You will find it just about everywhere. And it's the one responsible for the spectacular shows. So it's my background. It's the drive you can see there. That's on Hamlin Conservation Area near Shark Bay. And the central one is, when I first saw that, I thought it's a weed, but I don't know what weed it is. And it took me a long time to find out what it actually was. But it is a native daisy. It's Cephalosaurus. It has a most unusual growth habit, most unusual flower. I rather like it, but it's probably an acquired taste. It's a group. The Wildflower Society, by the way, has a very active page on Facebook, and well worth going to if you want to see more of these or more of West Australian wildflowers. But I want to start a subgroup there called Looking Down, because most people just look at the shrubs and they see this magic shrub and they think, wow, yeah, that's great. And they tread on the good looking stuff that's down on the ground. What they're likely to tread on are things like the unpronounceable plant on the bottom right. Anybody want to have a go? No? I'm not sure I know, but I just ignore the rest and call it Conchocephalus. I think that probably works fairly well. It's interesting. What you're looking at there is not the flowers. It flowered a long time ago. The flowers are minuscule and brown, minuscule, 1, maybe 2 millimeters across if you're lucky. And then they develop these little seed capsules, and that's what you're looking at there. Eremophilums, as opposed to eremophilums. Eremophilums are a group of annuals that like really harsh conditions, and they do very well in the garden. Once again, you give them good conditions and they grow really well. So there's a couple of the, I think, 6 or 7 species there are. Gilberta is out on its own as an individual genus, and it has these lovely nodding flowers, but I'm not sure about its potential. I spend a lot of time, those of you who've travelled WA will know this, but others are surprised to find their thoughts of WA are that we're a very dry state and it's just sort of semi-desert. And when I say to them, I spend a lot of my time walking around lakes, they go, lakes? Well, you don't tell them they're salt lakes and they're mostly dry, but around the edge of salt lakes, conditions are very harsh, but there's a whole heap of plants that have adapted to growing there and done very well. And the Nephosis are among the main genera that you'll find around there. So I put 3 of them there. Yeah, quite showy. Cassiniana, in fact, can be quite spectacular at times. And the little one on the right, Satifera, is one of those plants. It's a delight to behold, but you've got to be on your knees to do so. Let's move to Heleptrum. Once upon a time, all the daisies in WA were either Heleptrum or Helichrysum. And then when the taxonomists really took a good long hard look at it, they said, no, hang on, those are all South African species, ours are not Heleptrum or not Helichrysum. And so they all got renowned. That was the primary work of Paul Wilson. But one remains, and that's it on the top left, Heleptrum craspedioides, the only member of that genus now in Australia. In very harsh conditions, boggy or rocky soil or salty, you get this little mound of, looks like ice crystals at a distance, green ice crystals. It's another member of the daisy family, Hyaloclamis. So there's, every little niche is occupied by something or another. And then we move on the right-hand side to Hyalosperma. This is a great genus. It's got several really lovely looking plants in it that will probably find their way, hopefully, into ornamental horticulture. The one on the top right, Cotula, comes in white or yellow. Bottom left now is one of the forms of glutinosum, and that's known as the sweet everlasting or sweet smelling or fragrant because it does have quite a strong nectar fragrance. You know, when you go into a mass area of flowers, you do generally get a good whiff of nectar, but you only need a few of the venustum to give you a nice sense of smell. And simplex is one that comes from the southwest of WA, and that's another one I think has amazing potential. There's still a couple of challenges in growing it, but you get a small plant that's only 15 centimeters high at most, 10 to 15. It can carry 150 flowers, and it's just all flower across the top. Stunning little garden plant. Bottom right, Lawrencella davenportii, which has the common name of sticky everlasting. And it's sticky because the name, because the stem, the flower stem, is actually sticky. If you look at it very closely, it's got little bits of resin on hairs down the stem. And I've seen lots of tiny insects trapped in that. And I think possibly that's the only reason I can think why it has that habit. But it is unusual. The other unusual thing about it is you see it in the wild, thousands of them, right, everywhere. And the seed is big. It's one of the biggest seeds of all of them. And the germination is terrible. It's very difficult to get it to germinate. I don't know what the secret is. I would appreciate it. I think most things have been tried over time. Another Lawrencella is rosea. Again, a very common one, easy to grow, and one of the best features to me, apart from being very pleasant looking, has beautifully aromatic foliage. You just run your hand through the foliage to get the smell, which I love. And in the middle is one of the real oddities, but it's a fascinating plant to look at. You don't get the full idea from that picture. It's actually flat on the ground, and it has some mid to dark green leaves, slender leaves that come up, but spreading out, radiating out from the plant are these wiry stems, and then at the end of them are the flower balls. There's a whole heap of flowers in a woolly ball, and it has the common name of wires and wool, which is very appropriate. As far as I know, it's never been cultivated, but as a curiosity, it should be. It's one I would like to grow. And on the right, we're now getting into the desert areas with the leucochrysum. It's a stunning plant. It doesn't like the moisture conditions of the southwest very much, but it's certainly worth growing. Very strong. It's only an annual. But it's very strong growth, upright stems, and quite specky flowers. How are we going? You're still copying all these? Let's go to Myriacephalus on the left-hand side, another reasonable sized genus. The most common one of all is Guerini that you can see there. You will see that all around the place with very big yellow flowers, often sort of outgrown and a little bit odd shaped, but yeah, lovely plant. And while you're looking at that, you're probably treading on the one in the middle, which is Myriacephalus pygmaeus, meaning very small, but quite attractive flowers. And another common yellow one you will see with slender stems, not a lot of foliage, are the Podolepis. That's the most common one I put there on the right-hand side, which is Aristata. Podotheca is an odd one. You'll see it all around the metropolitan area in sandy soils. It loves poor sandy soils more than anything else. It's called golden longheads, the common name of it. And it does just that. What you're looking at is the flowers, but then when it's finished flowering, that whole seed head opens out right down from the bottom where those long bracts are. It opens out and a whole ball of fluff with the seeds on the end of long tails. This is the only one that I think might be distributed by animals. because the actual tip of the seed itself is incredibly sharp. If you're not careful when you look at this and handle it, it will actually stick in your hand. It'll stick in the skin, and it's got tiny little barbs on it. Doesn't come out that easily. It doesn't hurt, but that makes me think that yes, that it's possibly distributed by animals. On the center, we're going to go into Rhodantic, which is the biggest family, 43 of them. And don't worry, I'm not going to show them all to you. At some oddities, this is very much, Battii has the yellow and brown flowers. And while I talked about the sweet fragrance of some of the other ones, this one stinks. It is foul, which makes me think that obviously it's pollinated by blowflies. But the first time I experienced that, I thought there was something dead in the bush. There was a large patch of these, and I went and investigated, and that's definitely what it was. On the right, chlorocephala is one of the rare species of Rhodantia, of the everlasting. This is the yellow everlasting. Grows like a weed, so it's got great potential. You know the pink and white on the bottom left. That's not in any garden. Again, that picture is taken in the bush in the wild. And the other subspecies of it is in the center there, which is Splendida, or the showy silky white everlasting. I'll get there in a minute. Much more slender in its growth habit, but beautiful flowers, white flowers, yellow center, and then flecks of this deep purple that you get in many of them. And on the bottom right is Citrina. This comes in a range of colors. One of my favorite plants, looks fantastic, whether it's in bud or in flower. It's really good. Again, heading north and east, so not quite into the desert, but parts of the Pilbara and across into the desert and across much of central Australia, you get another Rhodantia, which is an annual or short-lived perennial, and spectacular flowering habit. That mound there is a good half-metre across and about 40 centimetres high, and it's all flower, quite specky. As opposed to the more subtle one in the middle, which is Heterantha. It took me a long time when I first discovered this to actually get a name on it. But it has a beautiful formal growing habit, which I'm not showing you here. But then these unusual flowers, long, slender brown stems and little nodding lanterns of flowers. They're bronze yellow, and there's green in there as well. It's a lovely looking thing. And on the right, well known amongst florists, another Rhodantia known as golden cluster everlasting, and that's in widespread cultivation, again, mainly for the dry and flower trade. Manglesii on the left, you know already, but what you know is the most common form. There's plenty of reason to believe that that particular species should be split up, because there are at least 6 different forms. And some of them quite markedly different. But I don't know about you, every time a species gets split up or renamed, I go, oh God, now I've got to remember something else. So for the while, I'm quite happy if it stays as Manglesii. One of the ones that's not grown as much as it should be, but I think Kings Park are probably leading the way in this, is Oppositifolia. It is very showy. It's very robust. Ironically, it's rare in the wild, but in the gardens it grows very well, self-seeds freely, and it's a great plant all round. Rhodantia spicata is a different Rhodantia again, but showy and tough and very widespread through most of the southwest of WA. Getting near the end, you'll be pleased to know of Asteraceae. Schurnias, a group with quite a lot of useful plants in them, not the biggest genus by any means. In the far north, you get things like Erzai, which is quite a bare plant, but quite showy flowers. Through much of the central parts of the agricultural areas and into the pastoral areas, you get the pink cluster everlasting, Schurnia cassiniana. Very easy to grow, great looking plant. On the right there is filifolia, and that has subspecies. And you can see on the left is, bottom left now, is another filifolia known as the showy everlasting. Quite specky. Then there are some of the daisies that you could almost walk on. In the centre there, this has just been renamed, so I'm getting used to the new name. It's known as the invisible plant because the stems are that fine that you really can't see it, and all you see when the flowers are open is that. It used to be Podolepis, and now it's CM Senia. I'll get there in a minute. Showy. And on the bottom right is one of the many unusual plants that are members of the daisies, but you find hard to believe. That's a Siloxerus, and that particular one basically grows in swamps and loves it. And many of the other Siloxerus have the same habit. Top left, Triptylodixis. We'll leave that one alone. But it's an interesting little plant that grows out there and, you know, in extremely hostile conditions. But when the weather's right, it grows and then disappears very quickly. Waitzias are plants that are pretty well known. There's quite a few of them. And they're able to occupy some fairly harsh conditions. I put this picture in because it tells a story. We have, much to the regret of many farmers and others, a lot of abandoned railways in WA. And the one good thing that the railways did was control the weeds down the rail track. So when they stopped using the tracks, these plants, like the Waitsia acuminata there, I don't know how much detail you can see, but that's all Waitsia all the way down the line. It's lovely and almost weed-free. And acuminata, while it's known as the orange everlasting, in fact comes in a range of colours, orange, white, yellow, probably yellow bronze, probably the most common. Bottom left is Waitsia nitida, and that is again a good, tough, hardy, and a great little garden specimen. And in the centre, Waitsia suaviolens. And to finish off, Asteraceae, we've got the strawflower on the bottom right. That's had more names than you and I have had hot breakfasts. But at the moment, it's settled on, this is the annual form. I hasten to add the annual West Australian form. That's the official name at the moment, Xerochrysum macranthum. About time for another intermission. Okay, and a question this time. There are parts of the state where when you get rain, the soil is clay loam, and when you get a lot of rain, you get a lot of water lying on the ground for a considerable time. And of course, there are plants that want to exploit this. And this mat you're looking at here is one of them. This is a plant that currently is known, and I say that because it's up for revision, currently is known as Peplidium muelleri. It's an annual that grows very fast, forms the mats, comes in generally this sort of bluish colour, but you also get it pinkish and you get white occasionally. And if you look at the flower, you'll see it's got an unusual shape. This plant has a secret, and the secret is known only by the pollinators. So how do they know what to do? I don't know, but this is what you have to do if you want to see the flower. Can you see it opening? Let's try another one. Not very good video, I'm afraid, but the best I could get at the time. So it's got this little security flap, I would call it, that you have to trigger in order to see or to get to the pollen or the receptors. It takes quite a lot of force to open that. So I'm curious to know what it is that's able to pollinate it. But I've never had the luxury of time. I'd love to have the luxury of time to sit there in a chair by the side of it and watch it all day and see what comes along. Any ideas? Oh, well, we'll keep thinking then. Okay, back to the plants. Brassicaceae, the cabbage family. Yes, we've got some of those too. Menkia on the left and in the middle is one of those that looks really good when it's small, and then it gets pretty daggy because it goes and sets heaps of seeds very quickly as it goes up the stem. Excuse me. But the Stenopetalum is one of the showy members of the family. You find it hard to believe that's a member of the cabbage family, wouldn't you? Stenopetalum is one, I think, and that's the showiest one out of the genus that's worth looking at. Then Campanulaceae, I think probably very common and widespread, is this plant in the bottom left with, I think, possibly the longest name of all of them, Hypercratériformis. But its common name is Woodbridge poison, and that's what most people would know it as. It comes in shades of pink, white, deep blue sometimes. Very showy, but because of the name Woodbridge poison, I think people think, oh, I'm not going to try and grow that. In the centre is an isotoma, and that to me is a stunning little plant. And by little, I mean that's probably no more than 6 centimetres high, 6 or 7 centimetres high. But I've got that in cultivation this year for the first time, and keeping my fingers crossed that we can get it to go. It's just about to start flowering now. When I've seen it en masse, it's really spectacular. And I think there are other colours hidden in there too. At the bottom right, and I know it looks like I'm going out of alphabetical order, but just to include it because it used to be isotoma, is one that you find in the rock crevices. And we've got lots of rocky outcrops. And if you are looking at coming and looking for flowers, around the side of these large rocks was often a good place to look because all the water ran off the rock, and these plants got extra water. Unfortunately, most of them now are infested with weeds, and you don't get the same result. But Lithotoma is one of those that likes being around the outside of rocks and in crevices.
John, what was the name of the plant with the little secret trapdoor again?
Peplidium.
I'm not even going to try and spell that. Yum.
Peplidium.
Oh, I did spell it right.
Hey, well done. Okay.
I'm going to try and put it in the chat. There we go. I've done it.
All right. So back to Campanulaceae. We've got quite a lot of lobelias, and I think people don't associate lobelias with West Australia, but yes, we do. We have quite a lot, and they're pretty showy. So on the left is Heterophylla. I have to thank my son for the photo of that. He said he was going to join in, but I can't see him. In the centre, Lobelia tenuior, that was the one I showed you unfurling. This is a great garden plant. It just flowers and flowers. It sets seeds like most lobelias do. If you ever bought lobelias as bedding plants, the little blue ones, you'll find little seeds popping up everywhere. This one does the same. And on the top right is one of my favorites, but it's tiny. This plant grows, if you're lucky, 7 centimetres high. It's a little cluster of flowers, pink, yellow, white, and seed like dust, but I think it's got great potential. Speaking of great potential, let's go to the bottom left. That's McGregoria, and it is truly spectacular. Again, you don't see that unless you've got a good year further inland. So you're almost on the fringes of deserts and going north. We get it just going into northern pastoral areas into the Pilbara, and then it runs across the north of the country as well. It's not there every year. It's common name because you just see it with nothing else around. You see this white blob on the ground. Its common name is desert snow, and it has that many flowers that you can't see the foliage. And very impressive to look at, but then when you smell it, beautiful sweet fragrance as well. So why isn't everybody growing it? Because we can't get it to germinate, that's why. But we'll get there. Cleome family has a couple of interesting members, until recently called Cleome. This is now Arabella. And moving into the pea family, Fabaceae, we have a lot of the genus Swainsona. And these plants are mostly ground covers, spreading out as they go, but you get the odd one or two like Maculaceana, which can reach as high as 2 metres in 1 year. Phenomenal growth on it. That's Ashburton pea is the common name of that. And of course, the Swainsonas now also include the most common one, best known one of all, Sturt's desert pea. My favourite is one on the right, which is Microphylla, because it's such a tight mass of flower. quite massive plant, a good mound, and then lots of flowers as well. Another large family, family. I need coffee, I think. Is the Goodeniaceae, and on the left, bottom left, Brunonia, very well known. Its common name is native cornflower. If you don't mind, I have a little whinge at this stage. I can't stand it when our plants are named after some other plants. This is probably the original. This was probably evolved way centuries before cornflower did. So if anything, the cornflower should be called a native Brunonia. It's a lovely thing. Yeah. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox and move on to Goodenia mimulioides. If you travel through much of West Australia's flower growing areas, through into pastoral areas, you will see masses of Goodenias, nearly all yellow, and very, very hard to come to grips with in terms of identifying. So I'll make no pretense about it at all. I'm a rank amateur when it comes to the Goodenias. There are probably 50 different annual species, and at first glance, they all look pretty much the same. One or two, however, do stand out, thankfully, and one of those is on the bottom right, which is Goodenia rosea. If you've been looking at our flowers for some time, you might know it as Valia rosea, but it was included in the Goodenias a while ago. I'm very grateful for that because I could never spell Valia properly. But this thing starts off pink and then goes white very quickly, but you do get masses of it in some areas, and usually fairly low growing to the ground, within 15 centimetres. Staying with Goodenias briefly, here are a couple of the other yellow ones, Berardiana, pinnatifolia. And then on the right-hand side, one of the very interesting plants, but again, tiny. I'm intrigued by this. It's on my wish list. And I do thank Manny for the photo. It's one of the monkey flowers, Mimulus, and very showy, very specky, and obviously with great potential. Into Solanaceae, where we've got Nicotianas, quite a few of those. Generally, you'll see the shape in that center picture of Rosulata, and that's how they grow generally, with a clump of leaves at the base and then long flowering stems coming up. And typical of the Solanaceae and other parts of the world, and particularly the nicotine group, the flowers have a sweet fragrance, but only at night time. During the day, no, only at night time, because I assume, like other members of the same family, they're moth pollinated, hence the white and hence the fragrance, to allow the moths to find them. And bottom right, Stylidaceae, yes, we have some of the trigger plants that are annuals, and leavenhookies are an interesting group, and they're good and they're showy and they're worth looking at. Well, that, you'll be pleased to know, is the end of the catalogue. I think we did about 100. You will be tested afterwards, by the way. But let's move on. What's the genetic potential of these? Well, I asked Meta AI if it wouldn't mind giving me a daisy with rainbow petals, and this is what it came up with. And I thought, I think I'll post that on Facebook and tell people I'm selling seeds of it for $50 each, and I'll probably make a fortune before they catch me. But we're a long way off that. However, when you look at what's available in Western Australia in terms of naturally and what the potential it's got, it's absolutely huge. This is a photo I took east of Beacon. There was this, as far as the eye could see, really, this Gilberta growing. And Gilberta is yellow. Everybody knows it's yellow. That's what the books say. But this one in the middle just stood out. I posted on Facebook and I said, if you want to stand out in the crowd, put on some bright lippy. But really what we're talking about here is the fact that the red is obviously in the genes. It's there. It's recessive, but it's there. And every now and again, it comes to the surface. And that, I think, is true of many of the species. The potential has just not been realised. I can show another one that I've been working with, which is the Cephalyptrum, again, that massed one you saw, white, yellow, but occasionally there's also long and short bracted forms of it. And this is a short bracted form that I found, and it had little shades of pink in it. So from a few shades of pink, after a few years, you get to the top right, where it's a deep pink bud, but then pink and white flowers. And then if you cross that with a yellow one, you get the ones on the bottom right. So the potential there is huge. And I've seen colour forms in the wild that are really to die for. So yeah, plenty of scope, plenty of scope. But how are we going for time? Yeah, better stop soon. What's the future like for our annuals? Well, fairly bleak, unfortunately. We have these roadside reserves, ironically called nature strips, and they're anything but for the major part. And this is how the weeds spread best. People burn them because they think that's the best way to control it, which favours the weeds even more. And the only colourful flowers you're left with are introduced weeds. That's status. If you look at the reserves, we do have lots of them. We do have lots of reserves in WA. Then it's difficult to manage these. The people responsible for managing them have my sympathies, because they keep getting given more land and more reserves, and they're expected to manage it on a shoestring. And it's obviously what the budget they get is nowhere near enough. Even if they got enough money, I don't know what would happen. This picture tells the story. You can see that while there are a few yellow native annuals in there, that's Waitsia nitida, there's also a lot of grass and other weeds coming in. In as little as 5 years, there won't be a single flower left there. It's very rapid change. The weeds take over very quickly. And some of the weeds are quite showy. So showy, in fact, that when they're there en masse, it makes a lot of us cringe. Photographs of them appear in tourist brochures as "come and see our wildflowers." And what you're looking at is ruby dock, or in this case, spectacular wildflowers known as Cape Primrose. What can we do about it? I really don't know. Probably very little. It's my hope that one day science will find a means of being able to breed into them a seed that ensures that all future plants only produce male flowers. Self-destruction would be nice. And this is happening all the way. This is Coal Seam Conservation Park near Menanue. This is visited by thousands of people every year, tens of thousands probably. I don't know the numbers. It's a very popular place to visit. It's within driving range of Perth, still a good range, but within range. And this is what it's famous for, which is the yellow pom-poms. But down in the bottom centre, you can see a little patch of darker colour and purple, and that's Patterson's Curse. And this next photo is the same conservation park, just a short distance away. There's nothing left at all. So really, don't want to be a pessimist, but there's not much future for many of these plants in situ. In the pastoral areas, probably better than others, but with all the activity that goes on with mining in particular, then nowadays they're far more careful than they used to be, but previously there was no need to clean machines or anything, and you could track the weeds spreading out from the mine sites that had come off the machines. But they're basically a bit pessimistic about their future in the wild. Very slim, but for many, I think their future may well be in our gardens. And this is a case in point. This is the showy everlasting, Escherinia. In the wild, this is only known from 3 locations, and they're all on private farms. That's it. But it's in widespread cultivation around the world. So its future is, pretty much secure. And botanic gardens now are leading the way, I think, in using these in landscape plantings. So this is at Kings Park, but I know that many other botanic gardens do the same. Widespread use of annuals through the place as fillers. We've got an increasing demand for generally native plants, for rewilding, this different terminology for the same thing. And I think that people are now realizing that the annual plants play a significant role in the whole landscape. And this is where I think the best chance for many of them lies, is when they are mainstream. So this is at the Big B, and there they are, everlastings of different sorts, on sale in punnets to gardeners for general garden use. Okay, I'm almost there. I've been asked several times, well, what are all these plants you showed me? This is a poster I produced for WA Daisies with many of the names on it. So if you want a more permanent reminder, there on the bottom, just go to wadaisies.com/blog and you will find it. And that from me is the end of the show. I think it's probably quite long enough too. Thank you for staying with me. If there are questions at this stage, happy to answer them. Up to you.
Thanks so much, John. That was brilliant. And I'm glad to see that you've put that link up so I can download them. I was madly screenshotting the ones I was like, oh my God, I want that. I want that. I want that. I think I'd end up with a backyard full of sand, like pots with sand in them, trying to germinate all the seeds in my little Melbourne garden. It's absolutely fascinating what is out there. And I really want to come over and see them all in their nature and natural state one day. So thank you so much, John. Getting lots of lovely thank yous in the comments as well. Has anyone got any final questions for John? You can turn your microphone on if you don't want to speed type it into the chat. Amateur, please define, says someone. I can't read your name. It just flashed up past me. Fantastic, John. We need an HMAA excursion, don't we ever?
Yeah. Look, I've been mucking around and growing with these things probably for the best part of 40 years. On and off, I mean, the need to earn a living and raise children interfered significantly for a while. Yeah, I'm back into it now. And look, there are more species to find, let alone anything else. We know that one of them is extinct. We can assume, I think, reasonably, that there are others that we haven't found before that are already extinct. And if you just look at the Asteraceae group in WA, about, let's see, a sixth of them have some priority ranking on them or another through Florabase. I don't think I've mentioned Florabase, and I should. If you want to know more, brilliant website. It's run by DBCA here. That's a government department. Just Google Florabase, and that's the definitive publicly accessible database for what our flowers are and what they're called. So Florabase shows that I think, as I say, I think it's 17% was the figure I came up with of the Asteraceae have some priority ranking, which means either they're not well known or they're in some sort of danger. Yeah, it's concerning. But I think the more people who know them, then that's the best thing for their future.
Amazing. Thanks so much, John. Again, lots of lovely thank yous in the comment section. Well, I might leave it there, end the meeting, and yeah, big round of applause again. Thank you, John. That was brilliant.
Thank you, John. It was fabulous. And Chloe, thank you.
Oh, pleasure. No worries. It was a nice way to brighten, literally brighten the end of the week, wasn't it?
It was wonderful.
All right. So I'm going to stop the recording right